Hey guys, and welcome back to episode 6 of Omnifactory. We're making really good progress. Last time we set up our DML system for expansion. We set up the blast furnaces, we got some more materials. We just have a look at energetic alloy. The things we're making in the blast furnace, right? So we have nearly 400. I just wire milled like 2 stacks of this. Vibrant sitting at nearly 600. And we're at 1200 aluminium. So I think it was well worth setting up those blast furnaces. I have changed our DML system just slightly since last time. I removed the Enderman models that were sitting here, and we now have them on this side. So this side is going to be for Enderman, and then I have one loot fabricator dedicated to Ender Pearls, which is what we need to create the pulsating polymer clay. That gets put in this Ender chest, and then extracted into this fluid extractor. I've also upgraded this electrolyzer to MV tier, and also this electric furnace to MV. I don't know if this will be sufficient yet, but it looks like it's keeping up so far, so I think we're good for the polymer clay at the moment. I added some more CEFs here just to keep up with the power demand, since they are MV machines, and the wires have been cleaned up just a little bit here. I've also added Ender Pearls and a couple other materials to this drawer wall, and then we're extracting it to go into the loot fab. That way we can have Ender Pearls available for our vibrant alloy for the blast furnace to take for this interface. Since we do overproduce Ender Pearls, and rather than having them in a drawer here and having to make a separate storage bus, I just moved it all in here, unified it, and then we'll export to the loot fabricators the pristine matter, which is this one here, I believe. That is Enderman. Although we're not quite overproducing pristine Enderman matter. We also upgraded our power, so we're currently at about 50% usage with a couple of machines running, so I think we're good, at least for now. So if we take a look at where we are in the quest book, we are just about to head into polyethylene. This leads into circuit wafers and the next tier of circuit, and then down here is a bunch more chemistry. So I think we're going to start that today anyway. First step is to make ethanol and sulfuric acid, and then we're going to make that into ethylene and polyethylene. So I've started crafting up all the materials we're going to need here. So the first step is to make ethanol. We're going to make that from biomass, and we're going to make use of our sugarcane. First step is to use some breweries. I'm going to do this at LV tier, since the quest mentions that we can do it either at LV or MV. And then we supply that with water using an Engraver, and we're also going to use our sugarcane farm. So we'll put a ender chest here, and then we'll round robin on item conduits. We'll connect the other side to our sugarcane farm. So now all of these breweries are now making biomass. I'm going to output all of the biomass into a distillery. We're first actually going to store that in a drum so we can use it later on in some other processes, I think. So this drum is now filling with biomass. And then we can put our biomass into the distillery. We will set filters on these for the fluids, and we need more cable. There we go, so that's powering that, and we're now making ethanol. We're going to store this for later as well. We will also filter this. So now we're getting ethanol on this drum. We're going to need a chemical reactor. Missing some rotors. There's some rotors. Make a couple of those for now. And the chemical reactor. So we'll connect it underneath like so. Alright, I switched some things about here. Turns out doing this and talking at the same time is not very easy. So I'll kind of just explain what we have here. The biomass is going in here, and then the ethanol gets stored in this tank here. All of these, by the way, have filters on them. And then here we have the water going underneath into this chemical reactor. It's being reacted with sulfur, which is being fed from this interface, and that's connected to our ME system. This reaction gives us hydrogen and sulfuric acid. The hydrogen goes to the right hand side and voids excess in this trash can with a lower priority. The sulfuric acid goes into this drum here. Then we're taking our ethanol and sulfuric acid, combining it in another chemical reactor. This gives us ethylene and diluted sulfuric acid. So now we have to deal with these two products. This diluted sulfuric acid, I think we're going to put in another distillery to turn it back into regular sulfuric acid, and this will cycle round. And then the ethylene will move down the production line. So there's another distillery for the diluted sulfuric acid. Actually, we'll move it over one more and we'll put in a drum here to store the ethylene coming out of this chemical reactor. So the next step for the ethylene is to make polyethylene. We have to react that with oxygen. And I was a bit stuck on how to make oxygen, so I'm not going to pretend I came up with this, but if we start with furnaces, we can turn those into oxygen. So if we just look in JEI here under the use of furnaces, we can smelt this into stone dust. Then we can use the stone dust to centrifuge into silicon dioxide dust. And then we'll electrolyze the silicon dioxide. This will give us silicon and also oxygen, which we'll use for this process, and we'll also store the silicon. That'll also be pretty useful later on for things like silicon bowls. So it's like a kind of 2-in-1 process here. It's a super efficient way to make the oxygen for this. So we'll start with our crafter and a cobblestone generator on top. We'll input the furnace recipe. So now this is making us furnaces. This will go into a macerator, which will be macerated into stone dust. We'll auto output this to a centrifuge, where it'll turn into silicon dioxide. And this will go into an electrolyzer to give us silicon and oxygen. Put our silicon in a drawer and our oxygen in a drum. And we'll void upgrade this. We'll then grab another chemical reactor. We'll filter this for oxygen and ethylene. And now we're making polyethylene. We can once again store this in a drum. We're then going to use a fluid solidifier to solidify it into sheets. And I suppose we'll do it over this side. So if we put our solidifier here, put our plate mold in, and then we have to get polyethylene in here. And we'll round robin between the drum and this fluid solidifier. So now we're making polyethylene sheets. And I guess we'll also store these in a drawer. And we'll put a drawer controller here and connect both of the drawers. And then later on we can put a storage bus on this. And it'll be accessible via our ME system. Alright, I've changed up a couple of things here. I ended up getting a bit confused, so I checked some resources online to help with how to set this up. Because like I mentioned right at the beginning of this, I am no expert in this pack. So yeah, it's going to take a bit of learning, but I'll show you what I've changed up here and why it kind of matters. So now instead of using these fluid conduits to transfer the fluids, we're now using the ME system. So we have fluid storage buses on all of the fluid storage tanks, or most of them anyway. And what this allows us to do is recall them using the fluid interface. So we can set them here and then they appear here and we extract out of this and into the machines. This allows us to use things like oxygen, which we're producing here with the furnaces. And we can send it over to our blast furnaces, like for example, to make annealed copper later on. We can also send the sulfuric acid to be used elsewhere. And the same with the ethylene. Now this distillery that's distilling the diluted sulfuric acid has a fluid storage bus. However, this is set as a lower priority. And when you set things as lower priority, they are used first when ME decides to extract fluids. So because this fluid storage bus and also this fluid storage bus both contain sulfuric acid, this one will always be used first. Because if we don't do that, this system could bottleneck and it'll like lock itself up. I don't know if that made sense or not, but hopefully it did. So anyways, now with this, we are producing polyethylene sheets and silicon. This is just a byproduct, but it's a useful byproduct to have. The main thing we're after is these polyethylene sheets. This is used basically all over the place for the next tier of machines. So we'll get to that soon, but it's also used for things like capacitors, which are used in the circuits. However, we're not quite finished there. We have to still do some more chemistry. While I was setting all that up, I noticed our data models have leveled up to self-aware. So I think I'll switch some of these back as well. We can take out the shulker, we don't need this in this one. At least not for now. So I think I'll swap that back out with the Guardian. I'll also swap the Wither for another Enderman. So I'm just making the materials to craft that just now. There's the other Enderman data model. So looking at the quest tabs here, the next step is going to be to make chlorine. We're going to make a mixer for salt water, and we're going to electrolyze salt as well. So we need a mixer and an electrolyzer. So there's a mixer and an electrolyzer. It's nice being able to craft with this AE system. It's been such a big time save. I love it. So next we'll put down a mixer. We're going to need some water for that as well. So we'll put that underneath using the trusty Engraver. We'll then need a way of supplying salt. Right now we don't have a supply of salt. I I think for now we're just going to buy the salt in with our Omni coins. Otherwise we could go mining for it. However, it doesn't take a lot of salt to produce what we were after here, so for now I'm just going to put an interface here, and what little salt we have from the ME system is going to be exported to here. So we'll configure this interface for salt, and we'll set it to 64, I suppose. Hide it from the interface terminal. Looks like we only have 29 at the moment. But yeah, I'll get some more of that processed. Anyways, we can import this into here. So this now should produce salt water, and then we want to electrolyze our salt water. So we'll auto output there. And this produces chlorine and hydrogen, and it's the chlorine that we're after. It also gives us this sodium hydroxide dust, which is useful later on in producing glycerol and biodiesel. So we're then going to put the hydrogen into this tank and void the excess. So we can extract on brown here. So this tank's filling up, and this obviously is a lower priority. And then we'll filter this for chlorine. So now we're getting chlorine here. Let's pick up a bucket for the quest as well. And lastly, we're going to chemical react our chlorine plus ethylene. So if we hook up a fluid conduit here to filter with chlorine and ethylene, insert on brown. So this chemical reactor gives us vinyl chloride and also hydrochloric acid. This hydrochloric acid, I'm just going to store it in this steel drum and trash the excess. So we'll put filters on both of these. And then this vinyl chloride we want to combine with oxygen. So we'll put it into this chemical reactor using a pump. We put it on this face, insert a fluid filter for vinyl chloride, and then import. Yeah, so now our vinyl chloride's getting put here. We just need a way of getting oxygen in here now. There, I swapped the placement of the drum here, so now we're storing our hydrochloric acid and trashing the excess here. And we just need an integrated circuit for this, and now we're producing polyvinyl chloride. Let's get a bucket for the quest. Oh, it wants us to make sheets for the quest. So now there's two things we have to do with this polyvinyl chloride. We have to make thin polyvinyl chloride sheets, which is made from the plates, and we also have to store it as plates for use in these plastic circuit boards. So for that we're going to need a fluid solidifier and a cluster mill. We'll put the plate mold in the fluid solidifier, and then we can auto-extract the chemical reactor. And then we'll round robin between the cluster mill and a drawer output, so that we get half as sheets and half as thin sheets. So now if we give this cluster mill power, we should be getting thin polyvinyl chloride sheets, which we are. They're going into here, good. Can lock this drawer, but what we can do is put a storage bus on this drawer controller and set this to high priority. So now we'll be able to see vinyl chloride, hydroxide dust, and we'll also put a storage bus on these drawers here as well. I guess I could swap these two. Directly insert into the drawer. Yeah, I'll do that. There, that's a bit cleaner. We'll also set this to high priority. So now we have access to the polyethylene sheets and the silicon dust here in our ME system. I guess I'll need a robot arm for this electrolyzer though, to output to the drawer controller. So let me get one of those. LV is fine, I think. There, and I think we're now done. Okay, setting all that up honestly took me a long time. It might not seem like it, but it took me a long time to do that. My head's a bit fried, but anyway, it's fun nonetheless to set all these processes up. So now we're producing things for better circuits. I was looking at the quest lines here. So this Annealed Copper quest is opened up. This is a blast furnace recipe. So I guess let's set that up and get that going. We have a fourth blast furnace that we're just using manually at the moment, but why don't we set that up for copper, or annealed copper? So annealed copper takes oxygen and copper ingots, both of which we have tons and tons and tons of now. The copper of course comes from DML, and the oxygen we're way overproducing in this system here. So we can easily just add a fluid interface onto the top of this. We'll take out all this gallium for now. I was just manually feeding this one. And I'll swap the input bus for a ULV as well. I suppose we'll also need a fluid input bus. Let me make one of those. There's the input hatch for fluids. And then we can just export out of the interface and straight into this. and we'll filter it for oxygen. And we'll also configure this fluid interface for oxygen. And then extract the sun brown. And this should be filling up now. Yes, it is. Nice. And then we can also put copper on the input on the items in this one here. We need an item filter for copper and send copper to the interface. So now you should fill up. Nice. And this should be running actually, which it is. We just need a space for the output. And that's my last item conduit. Extract on blue. And now we're getting annealed copper. Nice. So the last thing to do is set the level emitter. We'll put in the annealed copper, and I think we'll set the limit about 600 for now. Again, we'll tweak the numbers as needed, but yeah, this is making us annealed copper. Next up, I'd like to start making these circuit wafers in order to make the first tier 3 circuits, and this will allow us to get the MV assembling machine and start making SMD components to use all of this chemistry that we set up. So let's make a precision laser engraver. Oh wow, I'm actually surprised that I just have all this stuff. The power of batch crafting. Anyways, there's the laser engraver. Clean up the inventory a bit. So next up we have to make some lenses. I think these are all just made in the autoclave, so I guess I'll make one of each for now. So there's the 3 glass lenses, or sorry, the 3 different lenses. And the quest. Alright, there's the laser engraver placed here. So the quest wants us to make one of each. I guess I'll do that, but looking through JEI, we don't need some of them until a little bit later on. Like for example, this is the second tier 3 circuit, whereas we haven't made the first one yet, so... But we will make all 3 for just to get the quest, and then we'll unlock this tier 3 circuit quest here. Alright, so now that we have our integrated circuits, let's move on and make the first tier 3 circuit. This is a pretty expensive recipe at the moment, but it's the only one we can do at LV. And to make the MV assembler, which we want to do next, it requires the tier 3 circuits. So I think we have to make at least 2 of these. So I'm just crafting up some of these electrum wires that we'll need. So let's put in the recipe in this assembling machine for this. So it's 8 tier 2 circuits, capacitors, electrum wire, aluminium plates, and the newly cut integrated circuit. Oh, and resistors. There we go. So now we're crafting these tier 3 circuits. Nice, there's the first one. That should be a quest. So this now unlocks the MV assembler for us. We're missing conveyors and robot arms. Alright, and there is our MV assembler. And a quest? Yes it is. So for now we'll just stick it here. With this machine we can now put everything together that we've created today, so all of this chemistry and also our annealed copper, make that into wire and craft some SMD components, which drastically reduce the cost of circuits, which is amazing. Alright, check this out. Talk about the power of batch crafting. Look at all of this. So I crafted all the SMD capacitors, transistors and resistors. This allows us to make the third and final tier 1 circuits way cheaper. The last component we're missing here is the plastic circuit boards, which is polyethylene sheets. We have, I think, over 1,000 of those now. Copper foil, that's super easy, and sulfuric acid, we made that today as well. I'm just going to take a bit of time and do even more batch crafting, and then we'll see where we go from here. I'd quite like to set up a tree farm for rubber, because I find myself running out of that quite a bit. Otherwise we're going to have to find some other solution of coating cable, coating wire into cable. Alright, I played for about an hour, maybe a bit over that, last night as well. It's now the next morning, and we now have tons and tons of circuits. I ended up using some of the SMD components to craft these refined circuits, and you get these 4 at a time, so your materials really go a long way. You just explode in circuits when you start making them this cheap. So with all these we can now progress and make more machines, because after making all of these I was completely out of tier 2 circuits. Like each of these costs, I don't know, a couple of circuits each plus the storage buses. I mean, it's a really expensive setup for the way we were making circuits before. But now that we have the tier 1 and tier 2 circuits this cheap, yeah, I've said this before, but I just think that the way that it's set up, where it just gets easier when you're able to upgrade your automation and things become so much cheaper. It just feels really rewarding to be able to set this up and then you get all of your automation do things for you. That said, we've still got a long way to go. But yeah, at least with circuits now we can build more machines, which means more automation and more progression. Yeah, going into this pack, I was really confused about these circuit tiers. Like, it looks a bit daunting from here, but once you start making and familiarizing yourself with the circuits, it becomes really easy. Basically, the goal is to get down to the bottom of each one of these, because that's the cheapest version of the circuit, right? So these 2 circuits make all the same components, these 3 circuits make all the same components, and so on down the line. Although this one's cheaper than this one's cheaper than the first one, and yeah, it just continues like that. It's really easy to understand once you start playing. So yeah, as I mentioned, I think we're going to build our tree farm next time. I've just been doing some more processing of manual materials for now. Oh yeah, look at all these wires. I just chuck in ingots in here and like, yeah. I basically just go to the ME system, occasionally search for things like, I don't know, copper. See how many wires we've got, see we're down to like 300, and then chuck a couple stacks of copper in there. I mean, I'm not going to do it right now because we have tons and tons, but like 1 explodes into 2, and then 2 explodes into 4 fine copper wire. And I mean, copper's basically free anyway because of DML. It comes from Spider. So if we need more, we have 5 stacks of pristine, and each pristine turns into 12 copper. So I can just do this and get thousands and thousands of copper. But yeah, now that we have tier 2 circuits, these loot fabricators are really cheap for us now. So I think probably next episode I'm going to set up automatic loot fabrication, so that we can have it to where, similar to the blast furnaces, we'll put level emitters on these things, and whenever our stock of, let's say, copper gets low, we turn this machine on, it starts making us copper, extracts to the drawer, which we can see through the ME system, and then once we reach the threshold, this will turn off, and then we can build up our pristine matters for when we need the resources next. I think we'll probably also set up a tree farm next time, as this rubber situation is not ideal. I noticed also there was this silicon rubber, so maybe we'll look into that. I'm not sure exactly if that's going to be better or not. That takes polydimethylsiloxane dust. Man, that is a mouthful. Which is a bit more chemistry, but although I don't know if we can make it at this point, I don't know if it's worth setting that up, because rubber is just so much easier to make. We just have to have raw rubber pulp, which we can get from centrifuge and rubber. And if we get a tree farm, we'll have millions and millions of this. Yeah, the fact that we have circuits allows us to do so much now. We can probably start auto-crafting, and to be honest, I probably should have. I've probably done a bit too much batch crafting. I should start automating more things. I guess we also have a cobble works to set up, so maybe I'll do that as well to give us things like cobble, sand, gravel. They'll all be used like later down the line as well. I mean, man, there's just so much to do. I don't know exactly what order we're going to do it in, but yeah, I'm excited to get all that started. Anyways, I think it's about time to wrap this up. I'm really happy I got this set up. It's a big help, and this allows us to progress. So, this drawer should be locked. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for some more Omnifactory.